Here, that's relevant to birth. It's going to be Sif Yud. And the next year is going to be about not makis and pain that are relevant to birth, but more about certain medical conditions that are a result of birth. That we're going to deal with. There's a lot of choices on that, but today we're going to be more focused on Rea Machmas Tashmish after birth. So this is in Sif Yud of the Ramah, Sif Yud in the Ramah. The Ramah says as follows. In the middle of Sif Yud in the Ramah. V'im eira lo sherasa gimel pamim b'bir rishena she'achad leidasa. Oy rasa achar kol leida gimel pamim uve'insayim lo rasa. Yesh shekosvu lehokel lehatira lebayla ki talinan hari'iyah bechulshasa adayin mikoyach leidasa. What? Shehuku hatzdadi mikoyach leida. V'lo chen roya samuch leida v'lo yachar kach. V'talinan beleida k'moy shetalinan b'maka. Where is this from? Agos Sharidura and Chuvas Rabbi Yechanan, which is brought in Agos Sharidura. Right? V'kol ze im kvar ovra v'shim shabenin zarishen shehuchziku biyah shel heter achar biyah shel isra v'imra so gim pan ritzuf machaleida, and there was no bias ksheres without dam loy talinan beleida l'tzirich abdikas sheferes. Yeah, kain mash masham in Agos Sharidura and Chuvas Rabbi Yechanan. Miu komokim shet, then the general klal komokim shetzirich abdika im ovra v'shimsha v'lo yirasa muteres. The tashmish zeh shelo yirasa by odif v'bdika sheferes kanal. This is from the Ramah. This is what the Ramah says over here. It encapsulates the whole discussion of Rea Machmas Tashmish after birth. Yeah, so we have three points in the points in the Ramah. So read it just Pshuta Shel Mikra. What it means. The first one is she saw 3 times. Though it's the simple reading of the Ramah. She saw 3 times. That means the first time after each birth. She saw 1 time after birth. Then she stopped seeing blood Machmas Tashmish. Then she had another birth, and she saw again the first time. And then she had a 3rd birth, and she saw again 1 time afterwards. And over there, Yeshikosvu, the Ramah says, Yeshikosvu Samar Mekel Lahatira Lebayla. Hatira Lebayla, that means that she's not, simple reading again, that she's not a Surah Machmas Tashmish, but still she has to do Shivanikim. Because we are Toile, that what she saw is machmas, the fact that she gave birth, and there was makas on the tzdodim, got a makkah from the koyach haleida. And
you're saying this is 1 time after each birth?
Yeah, that's the first simple reason. 3 births, she has 3 kids.
Right, so 1 time after each
First time after each birth.
So why would they even be connected? The Shuchat, we say pretty clearly that they have to be mitzvah.
So you're going to see in the Alter Rebbe calls it vesas haleidas. We had a svara maybe to make it aser. Because just like any other vesas that comes as a result of something, she jumps, she sees. So here she gave birth, she sees, she gave birth, she sees, she gave birth, she sees. So the 4th time she's going to give birth, we have a problem. She's going to see. There might be a problem the first birth afterwards. The first bia after birth. And it's going to be a problem because there's no way to get around it. If we kaveh vesas, there's no way to get around it because she can't be with her baila, whatever the first time after birth is going to be, unless there's a Rabbi Yechanan, the Gemara, which came up with a solution on not to go into the city, but that doesn't work in this scenario. Sheferes, yeah. Sheferes is something else, maybe, yeah. And the second thing that the Ramah brings is that she saw after each birth 3 times. That means first birth, then she saw 3 times, then she didn't see anything. Then she saw second birth, then she saw 3 times, and she didn't see anything. Then third birth, and she saw 3 times, and she didn't see anything. And now they're coming to ask. Right? So if they would come ask after the first time, you would tell her it's Aser. But now that you have 3 times, so sign the first one, we say that, we'll talk about simple, before we're getting into Shach, Taz, Alter Rebbe. Simple reading the first time, we would say that she saw 3 times after birth. This is a raya that it's all because of the birth. The second scenario where we say she saw 3 times after first birth, really she would become Aser. She saw a second time 3 times after birth, Ritzufim, and a third time, really she would have become Aser. But the fact that she saw 3 times, 3 in a row, becomes a chazaka that she only sees because of birth. So we also tell in the Leda. However, if she comes after the first 3 times and there was no bias heter, then she has to do bdika sheferes. But if avra v'shimsha, then we have the rule that Rama brings. Avra v'shimsha is better than sheferes, and therefore she is muter l'baylo. There is a big machlekes Taz Shach, and then the Kudas HaKesef, which argues on the Taz, which is a Shach, but he retracts a little bit of what he says in the Shach. So first we go through the Taz. The Taz is a very, we'll call it one way of understanding the Ramah. The way he explains is as follows. First rule you have to know the way the Taz understands the Ramah, the Taz and Sifkot and Tesvav. He puts down a rule that the Taliyah in a Makkah after Leda only applies to the first Bia after birth. Therefore, if she sees 3 times after the first birth, she became Aser right away.
It should be 4 times.
Huh?
It should be 4 times.
She's 1, 2, 3 by the...
Yeah, the first one was from the Leda, and the next 3 are from...
No, but then we see she becomes Aser. Yeah, 4th time technically, but he says the first 3 times she's Aser. And the fact that she's going to come back and see and Ritzufim after the second birth and after the third birth does not make this muter l'mafreya. The fact that she became Aser.
Maybe you could say that's why he holds that you don't need 4. It could be the second and third time that she's doing machmas tashmish, she's being megal l'mafreya.
That the first time was also machmas tashmish, yeah. Now, the only time that he's matir, how does he understand the Ramah? He changes the lashon of the Ramah, and therefore, if she sees only 1 time after each birth, then by the 3rd time, when she becomes muchzik, so to speak, that she gets her special veses, then that proves that the mafreya, all 3 were, since she never became Aser by 3 times Ritzufim, rather she had 1 time after birth, 1 time after birth, 1 time after birth, all 3 retroactively combined to say that it's machmas leida. So what's the Ramah saying that Rasa Gimel Pa'amim Ritzufim after each birth? Doesn't mean Ritzufim. It means that there was 3 random times after birth and there was bias heter between them, and then we say that means she saw, then we say that it's machmas leida.
3 times after every birth, she saw 3 times, but
it wasn't Ritzufim. Because if it would be Ritzufim, become Aser and you can't fix it. That's the sword of the Taz. The Shach, who did not see the Taz when he wrote the Shach on Yeridea, disagrees. And the way the Shach in Sifkot Lamed Aleph explains it is, first thing is we're talking about she saw 3 times Ritzufim after the first birth. And Takef, she would ask us, we would say she's Aser. But she didn't ask us. And she had a second birth, and she again saw 3 times Ritzufim. And she had a third birth, and she again saw 3 times Ritzufim. And now she comes and she asks us, we say that is mater l'mafreya, not like the Taz, mater l'mafreya, that they're all machmas leida, and she is muter. However, in the Kudas HaKesef, when the Shach argues on the Taz, there's a very long Kudas HaKesef on the Taz of Katan Tesvav, he says no, it doesn't mean 3 times after each birth, it means 1 time after each birth. So 1 time after each birth, then we go lemafreya.
Kind of obvious though, no?
Huh?
Kind of obvious. She only sees 5 after Leda, it's because of
Yes, he goes back, he does agree with the Tas partially. He just doesn't say about the 3 times, that if she saw 3 times, and then she saw Bias Heter, and then 3 times and Bias Heter, and 3 times and Bias Heter, then she's still mutter. So if she did not have any Bias Heter after the 3 times of the first birth, then technically she's asur. That's when she has to do b'dika sheferes. But if avra v'rasa, then she is fine, right? Now, what does it mean? Like I mentioned before, what does it mean muteres l'bayla? The Pesach Tshuva right away points out to you, it doesn't mean that she could skip shiva nakim. Muteres l'bayla means, he brings from the Siddur Tahar and the Chavas Das, that nakim vaday tzricha. Ve'eino teila b'makas leida. It's not like a regular makkah that we can't be toilet stam in a makkah like we say regarding makkah, that there are certain scenarios where she would become mutter without, if she sees 3 times, she would become mutter right away. No, it means that she's mut, she does not become a surah l'bayla, but she is still tmeya and she has to have shiva nikim. We're toilet enough that she's not roya machmas tashmish to be a surah l'bayla, but the blood is still dam tummy. Why is that? For that, look at the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe, we have 4 sifkot in the Alter Rebbe. We'll go through them quickly. Alter Rebbe, sifkot and memhei. We'll start with sifkot and memhei. He explains the first point in the Alter Rebbe. The first point in the Ramah. The first point in the Ramah is that she saw Sheraso Gimel Pa'amim Bebir Rishena She'achar Leidaso. Right? What does that mean? The Alter Rebbe takes the explanation of the Shach and Nekudas HaKesef and in the Taz, and he explains very simple. Dehainu shebegimel leida yisrasa pam achas achar kol leida bevia rishena she'achar tfilas leidaso. Means the first bia after each birth she saw. Afterwards she didn't see anymore until the second birth, and then comes the third birth. So then what happens? Kov Allah veses leleidas. That's how Alter Rebbe defines it, the new veses, which we didn't see until now. Veses leleidas. And what is this veses leleidas? It's not a makkah. It's a veses leleidas, which is, he explains it, lir'ois bevia rishayna she'achad leidaso she'lo niksa v'tahara mimikoir domeha be'eis leidaso v'nishar miu domim b'moker v'yoytzi mimenu b'tash b'shoyachot. There is leftover blood from the birth, and that comes out from her mokoir at the first bia after Leda, and that is, so be'etzem it is dam that comes from the mokoir. And be'etzem, she would be raya machmas tashmish. However, we would have a svare to be oyser her, ha'ilnu le'oysra, pentire bevia aleph shachaleda daled. Why? Because she was kov of these vessels, that there is blood left over from the birth, and that blood comes out in the first bia after Leda. And then that comes the Ramah and tells us, no, she'esha kosvu l'hakel. This is the kosvu l'hakel that Ramah brings. Who is it, the kosvu l'hakel? It's obviously the Arkemoshe, which is the Ramah, the Nekudas HaKesef, which the Shach brings, and the Minchas Yaakov. So that is the first Nekuda in the Ramah. That there is the way the Alter Rebbe explains it. You have a new concept of veses l'leidos. She's not seeing blood machmas makkah. It's not a makkah that does blood. Rather, it's machmas leida, that blood comes from the makkah, and therefore we had a svara to be oyser, and on that comes the yesha kosvu l'hakel, that we say that this blood is really blood that comes as a result of leida, and we are mater her. Now, just a thought on the side: what will be the nafkamina if we say that it's mitzad makeh or mitzad blood left over? Simple, C-sections. Because if we say it's only mitzad makeh, the makeh in the C-sections is not, the baby's coming out from the side. It'll be a different kind of makeh. It'll be a different kind of makeh.
Dam that's left over is dam from the makar, not a makar.
So according to the Alter Rebbe, the way he explains is dam in a makar, so you have no problem. Huh? Zainikim, yeah. But it's clear that they have to. Everybody holds you have to wait Zainikim. The Pischat Shuva doesn't bring anybody farket. There are other people. And Alter Rebbe later will also say that you have to wait Zainikim. And the reason is simply because that's how we look at it. We look, it's actually dam in a makar, dam left over from Leda. The only thing is she's muteres habayla. Now, what's the second thing in the Ramad? Alter Rebbe explains Sifkatim and Vav. That that she saw after each birth 3 times. What would that be? It's talking about that she saw 3 times after the first birth, and technically she became aser to her husband. However, she did not come and ask. She was over of a shimsha. And he comes by He came after the 3rd time after 3 times. When the 3rd birth, he came before he was with his wife. He realized that something is wrong. The 1st birth, he didn't come ask the Rav. Just she went to mikveh and it was fine. 2nd time, 2nd birth, after the 3rd time she saw she went to mikveh, it was fine, she was with her. Comes the 3rd time, 3 times 3, 3rd time, and after the 3rd after the 3rd birth, he comes and asks the Rav before she goes to mikveh. And then we have 2 problems. First of all, we have Veses Leidus. Because she saw 3 times after each one. Right? So we have Veses Leidus, so really should be Isur for the 4th birth. But benois after that, right now we have a problem because she saw 3 times in a row. She should become Isur with 2 reasons. Still, the Ramah comes and tells you, no, we're still Mekel. We're still Toil and Chulshas Aleida. Yeah? Because Lu Yitzur, she would be with her husband again. Im Avra V'Shimsha, and she didn't see, Alter Rebbe says you don't really need the Svar of Chulshas Aleida. The fact is, she was with her husband, and we know from the end of the Ramah that Avra V'Shimsha is better than B'dika Sheferes. Lu Yitzur would be B'dika Sheferes. So yes, after the 1st birth, she would need a B'dika Sheferes. After 3 times after the 1st birth, she would need a B'dika Sheferes. But she Avra V'Shimsha. Avra V'Shimsha is better than B'dika Sheferes. She was over, but it works better. We don't recommend it, but it's Aser, but still she did it. She should become Mutter.
This is to be matter for later, not to be matter now.
To be matter her now, we say Chulshas Aleida. The fact that she had 3 times, that proves it's all because of Chulshas Aleida, even the 3rd time. We're matter her Labaila, not Matiru Mechmashiv Nakim. After the 3rd time, no. That's the whole Chiddush of the Ramah. We toil in Chulshas Aleida after the 3rd time. When she has 3 times, the 3rd time, we still toil in Chulshas Aleida. That's the Yeshe Kos V'Lahakal. That's what the Ramah brings. Because Al Pi Svara, she would need a Sheferes after the first 3 times, after the second 3 times, after the 3rd 3 times. But she still no. We say no. The Yeshe Kos V'Lahakal is no. She does not need the B'dika Sheferes. We're toil in Chulshas Aleida and she's Mutter.
Even the first time?
Huh?
Even the first time?
If she was over V'Shimsha?
Yeah, before she was Shimsha.
Before she was over V'Shimsha, we're telling... No, because we don't have a Chazaka yet. We need a Chazaka. Yeah. Now comes Sifkatim Zayin, and the Alter Rebbe says, we're going to have a big question, Talina Beleida, based on what we just learned until now, how you could be Talina Leida. First question you have, if it's a Makkah, how do you know if it's Meitzidam or not? Nobody checked and said this Makkah is Meitzidam. So she has Makkah. Well, how do you know it's Meitzidam? He says, Ava, Pishainu you doing Meitzidam. We're still Toila, according to the Rashba. Because as long as you know there's a Makkah, and you know that it could be Meitzidam. Because we explained what a Makkah is something which collects blood, and therefore we are Toila in it. And even according to Sefer HaTrum, which is more machmir than the Rashba, and says that you have to know that the Makkah is Meitzidam, when it comes to Leda, he would be Mekel. Why? Because by a Leda we know for a fact a regular Leda, there's a lot of blood, the sides get hurt a lot from the birth, when it's a regular birth. And until we figure out that this makkah got healed and does not anymore release blood because of maga and doichak, we're still toile that because maga and doichak caused the blood to come from the sides, and it's not dam tameh. What is this? The Alter Rebbe brings this from the Shari Dura. He says, because belav achi, we have the day of Rabbeinu Chananel, which we don't pass like it la'alacha, but we use it over here. What's the day of Rabbeinu Chananel? That the whole din of Rei Machmas Tashmish only applies if she saw right away after she got married. First time after she got married, she saw, and then the second time and the third time. But if right after she got married, she saw, she did not see anything, she had bias heter without any blood, and then afterwards she saw 3 times in a row. According to Rabbeinu Chananel, she will never become Rei Machmas Tashmish. Rei Machmas Tashmish is only the beginning of birth. As long as she didn't have a bias shel heter mi bal zeh la'olam, that's when you have Rei Machmas Tashmish. If you don't have bias shel heter mi bal zeh, but if you do have a bias shel heter mi bal zeh, and after the marriage, she does not become a Surah Machmas Tashmish. Why? Because we see the definition of the Rabbeinu Chananel is, we see that this husband has koichos de isura u de hetera. Sometimes he could bring about a bia. So it doesn't bring a bia muteres. So we can't make him asur. We can't make her asur l'bayla machmas tashmish. So even though we don't pass like Rabbeinu Chananel. Why don't we pass like Rabbeinu Chananel? Because the koichos shel isur came after the koichos shel eter, and they're later. In this scenario of birth, so take there was koichos shel isur. First it was koichos shel eter, then there was koichos shel isur. But afterwards, after the 3 times that she saw koichos shel isur after the first birth, went back to koichos shel eter because she saw without any blood. Therefore, she does not become asura lebayla. Why? We can't completely disregard Rabbeinu Chananel. So it comes in a certain scenario, we do rely on Rabbeinu Chananel. So that's all the Shari Dura. And the Rama, when he wants to be Mekel, he's Mekel in both, this is Alter Rebbe explains it, both Shittas together. We have to have both Svaras together. Svara number 1, the Chulshas Leida. And Svara number 2, Shalei L'Hagol Kakach against Rabbeinu Chananel. So therefore, because you need both, but it's not enough, the Alter Rebbe says, both of them together is still not enough to be mater her without Shiva Nakim. It's only mater her to not make her Asur L'Bailas. Therefore over here the Alter Rebbe brings, you still need Shiva Nakim. You can't just rely on these 2 svaras to say that she's muteres completely. Rather, she's muteres L'Baila, that she's not, that she needs Shiva Nakim. She doesn't have to be, she ain't tzirich l'izgashim, and she doesn't have to get divorced from him. But she's still in Shiva Nakim. Why? Because what Rabbeinu Chananel says about Rei Machmas Tashmish, that if it's after Bias Heter, it comes the 3 times of Tzufim, she does not become Asura, it does not become Asura L'Baila. She doesn't have to divorce her. So if you want to use Rabbeinu Chananel, you can't go more extreme than Rabbeinu Chananel. Rabbeinu Chananel was only Mater L'Baila, but after Shiva Nakim. So you can't use that over here to say, it doesn't even need Shiva Nakim. Rather, no, we do need Shiva Nakim. And Alter Rebbe says that's how it's clear from the Darkei Moshe and the Kreisi Plesi. But if you would not have one of the 2, as you're going to see here, if you have one without the other, for example, if you have just the svara of Lilach Leka Rabbeinu Chananel without the svara of Chulshas Leida, we would not be able to be mater her after 3 times after the third birth. So she sees it 3 times after the 3rd birth. We only have over here the svara of, if we only would rely on the svara of Shalei L'Hakol Neged Rabbeinu Chananel, this would not be enough to allow us to say that she is muteres l'bayla. Rather, she would need a bdigas referes. And why is that you would need it? Because when we look at this, we don't look at this as a makeh. We look at this as nisrapa. If you remember, we discussed before, there's a difference between if we're tailing a makeh or we're tailing nisrapa. If we're tailing a makeh, then all the bias afterwards are bias heter, and there's no isser, doesn't need shiva nekim, we don't have to worry about it, and we don't chayshash niskalkala. As long as there's a makeh, we are tailing the makeh. But if we say nisrapa, which is, this is what we have over here, and we can't rely on it, because by nisrapa, if she sees 3 times after nisrapa, she's chesed as a kalkula. So we say after the first birth she saw 3 times, and then she had a avra v'shimsha, and that became a nisrapa. So she's mutter. Then the second birth she saw 3 times, she became also then avra v'shimsha, she was nisrapa a second time. Now comes the third time, and she saw 3 times, but she was not yet avra v'shimsha, so she's aser. If she's aser, she needs a bdikas shviferes. But if you're going to rely on that it comes from the tzaddim, if you're going to say that it's not that the 3 times she saw is because of makkah and not because of nisrapa, then you don't have the problem. But if we follow the svara that it's only mitzad nisrapa, it's not enough. So therefore, if you wouldn't have the time of chulshas aleida and the makkah, you would have a problem, and she would need a shviferes. The only time you'd be matter is when we combine the 2 svaras together. So then comes and he explains to you the last part of the Ramo, where we say that it was after the first birth she saw 3 times, not after the third birth. After the first birth she saw 3 times, and then she comes, asks the Rav. Over there the Ramo says that you need a bdika shviferes, and we don't say it's just because chulshas aleida, you need a bdika shviferes, and or if avra v'shimsha, it's mutter, she becomes mutter afterwards. And Alter Rebbe explains to you the svaras. Why? First of all, since there was no bias heter after bias isur, so she's still in the gedder of aser, because she has it 3 times. And therefore, you don't have the svar of Rabbeinu Chananel. Because the svar of Rabbeinu Chananel is when there was a bias heter and a bias isur. But over here, you know that there was birth, and there's only bias isur. 3 times bias isur. So you don't have the svar of Rabbeinu Chananel. You only have the svar of chulshas leida. You only have one of the 2. Since you only have one of the 2, you need a bdika shviferes, and you can't rely and say of the svar of Rabbeinu Chananel. And you only, if you want to go the other way, you only have the chulshas leida. Or you say it's only chulshas leida, and you can't have just the svaras of Rabbeinu Chananel together with it. Just can't rely straight up on Rabbeinu Chananel, because all the poskim are chaylik on him. That's the explanation. Then comes Alter Rebbe to a whole new topic. But this, all this is talking about when she sees achar yimei toyar. We know that after birth, the first 33 days for a boy and the first 66 days for a girl is called yimei toyar. Mideiraisa, it's not dam nida. So even though we were machmir, the not to be, not shaloi livoil, on dam toyhar, still in all, it's not enough to be oiser isha lebaila if she saw blood at that time. And all she needs is shiva nekiyim and a tvila. And we do not say that just because she saw 3 times during Yimei Toyhar, that's going to cause that after the Yimei Toyhar she's going to see again Machmas Tashmish. No, these 3 times she saw blood was Dam Toyhar. Therefore, Taka she's Asura Livoil, therefore she would need Shiva Nekiyim, but it's not enough for Machmas Tashmish. Umiyimei Tahara Limei Tuma Lekova versus Ladina de Gemara. Core being that Medina de Gemara these are Yemei Tahare, so she can't be Kaveya verses from on the Yemei Tahare to apply to Yemei Tuma. The fact that during the time that she's Tahira, she was Kaveya this sort of verses of Rebbe, because Rebbe starts within verses ultimately, like we saw in the other place in Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe brings the way how to understand what Rebbe Machmas is either it's verses Aguf or verses some other verses, but it's within verses. So, but over here you want to say Rebbe Machmas Tashmish during Yemei Toyar, you can't be Kaveya verses in days that are Yemei Toyar Medina de Gemara. You can't be Kaveya verses in days that are Yemei Tuma Medina de Gemara. So therefore you can't rely on these Yemei Toyar and say she was Kaveh Veses in Yemei Toyar, which is going to apply also in Yemei Tumah. No, during first Kaveh, during Yemei Toyar, she saw all she needs is Shiva Nekiyim, and she's good to go. The only time this Chashash would happen is if it is during Yemei Tumah. And then Alter Rebbe adds another interesting din in parentheses. A woman saw 3 times machmas tashmish and she became pregnant the 3rd time. So now she's asur shasur l'bayla. Up until when is she asur l'bayla? Asur l'bayla ad haleda. Only until he gives birth. She gives birth. After she gives birth, she's in Yemei Toyar. She's not in Yemei Tumah. Therefore, yesh lahatira le'pam achas achaleda b'Yemei Toyar. She's allowed to be with him, even though she saw 3 times and she became pregnant. When she's going to give birth, she's going into Yemei Toyar, and during those Yemei Toyar, she would be able to be with her husband 1 time, and if she doesn't see that 1 time, she become mutter la'olam. Why? Ultimately, mitzvah mimanavshach. Mitzvah Yemei Toyar could only work to save her. What it did was this seeing in Yemei Toyar was of Rav Shimshon, and Rav Shimshon during Yemei Toyar is better than the B'dika Shviferes. And this whole din of Rasa Machmas Tashmish is Medin Vestas, and Vestas is the Rabbanon. We're not Machmir. In Vestas the Rabbanon to be Moitzi Isha Rebaila. That is summary of the Alter Rebbe. Now we move to 2 short Tzemach Tzedeks. They have, which Tzemach Tzedek is going to discuss the idea of pain after birth. The first one is Kuf Zayin, and the second one is Kuf Tes. They're both very short ones. Printed on the same page, page 150 in our booklet. And they're essentially a continuation one to another, even though they're not continuation, they're directly connected. I did mention one of them in the past, so I'm going to go through it again now. Whoever doesn't have a Tzemach Tzedek, you can go get one. I'll wait for you. Okay, Kuf Zayin. The question in Kuf Zayin is a simple question. She gave birth. First time after birth, she was Rea Machmas Tashmish. She had a lot of pain, a lot of blood. She went to mikveh, she became tired. Second time, less pain, less blood, but again Rea Machmas Tashmish. Third time, even less blood and even less pain. The question is, what is her din? So he starts by saying there's a Masas Binyamin regarding a Besula, which is Rea Machmas Tashmish, that he brings in the name of the Ritzvah, that by a regular woman that sees Ka'ev, that she feels pain during Tashmish, we're not Meiko. Without B'dika Shviferes. And he's Medayik from it, the Masas Binyamin, that Besula Shani, by a Besula is different. How long? Afilu Meshach Rav K'meishana. Even up to a year, if she feels pain, that Rea Machmas Tashmish were toil in her Besulim, we're not saying that it's mitzad. As long as the pain is continuing, she is not going to be considered Rea Machmas Tashmish. As long as the first pain from Bia, from the first Besulim, continues going further, that pain still counts her as, so to speak, a hemshech of dam Besulim, and she does not keveya Rea Machmas Tashmish during that time. Only by a regular woman, we say that pain is not enough. And you probably remember we discussed last time from the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe has the whole Kunter Sachen over there. The difference between pain, between bleeding which comes from the Ka'ev, or Ka'ev which brings about bleeding from the Moker. And the Alter Rebbe says you can't be makel against the Chacham Tzvi so easily. But we're going to get to it soon. Now, we see in the Tshuva Rabbeinu Yochanan, which is brought in the Goy Sharadura, which is essentially the Yesod of the Ramah, that when it comes to birth, you could be toiler in a makkah. right? You could be makas haleda, you could be toila. So al pi svara, Tzemach Tzedek says we could say the same thing should apply in the bias after Leda, that at least the first bias after Leda, when she feels pain, can't be any worse than the Besula who feels pain, and the Masas Binyamin says it goes up to even to a year. So he says, no, but when it comes to so he says, no, but this we see only by a Besula. But when it comes to Yeledes, we don't see this being mentioned anywhere, that we could rely on a Makkah and continue for a long time. It's not mentioned at all. So therefore, maybe we can't be Mekel by a Makkah by Yeledes. So he says, no, we could be. What's the Raya? Because by Rouah Machmas Tashmish, the Gemara says that if she has a Veses coming up, whether even if it's the day before the Veses, Toila Bevesta, and we say that she is not Rouah Machmas Tashmish, rather she's Rouah because of her Veses. Therefore, Im Kein Hochinami Gabi Yeledes. Same thing should apply by a Yeledes. That being that the first time she had a lot of pain and she saw a lot of blood. So we say that it's because of the makkah that came from the Leda. And the second time she saw a little bit less blood and a little bit less pain. So we're still toila. And the third time we also see less blood and less. So as long as this is just continuing the pain and the blood, we could say that it's like Yesh Lavesis. That she's toila bevest over here, she could be toila in the Leda as long as needed. You have a problem because the Shulchan Aruch says that if she saw 3 times Ritzufim Achar Leda, we're not Toila in the Leda. We just saw that in the end of the Raman Shniz Abdika Sheferes, only 3 times 3 or 3 different births we are Toila. But if she just sees 3 times after birth, we are not Toila. We need Abdika Sheferes. The Tzemach Tzedek can point to something very interesting. So the Shulchan Aruch is talking about when she doesn't feel any pain after birth. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't say she feels pain. Doesn't say she doesn't feel pain. So when the Shulchan Aruch says that she's Roya 3 times after, at the end of the Ramah and Sif Yud, the Ramah says that she's Roya 3 times after birth and she needs a Sheferes, he's not talking when there's pain. If there would be pain, that wouldn't be the din. If it would be pain, that pain would be considered a raya that she is machmas leida. Because that tshuva Rabbi Yechanan, which is the proof, which is the source of the Ramah, doesn't mention anything about pain. But here that she does feel pain, cave gadol shani, the cave zevadai mechushas atzodim, for sure this pain comes from the chushas atzodim. That is a proof for the chushas atzodim. The whole reason why the Ramah needs 3 times to ascertain that it came as a result of birth is because there's no pain. And being that there's no pain, you have to have a chazaka that it came as a result of birth. So you might need 3 times 3 if she's over Shimsha, or 1 time after every birth. And then you could say, it's because of the birth. But if it wouldn't be, if there would be some other raya that it's because of the birth, you don't need to be machzik that it's because of the birth. It's enough to just say that she sees she has pain, she's obviously came from the birth. Yes, a hocha shemageshes cave gadol b'shastaj meshani, the cave zevad b'choshes hazodim hu. Yeah, and what's the another raya to it? He says, and this is also could be understood from what the Alter Rebbe himself writes, that when she sees, brings from the Shach, when she sees 1 time be mei toihar in the beginning, before you can't be mitzarefet. Why? Because we made tahara, they made tumah lekavaveses. Like we explained, from days of tumah to days tahara, days of tumah, you can't be kiveya. So over here also, if you have the chushas haleda with the cave gadol, and that works as a proof, yesh loyma demizel lekavo veses al zman rav la'achar haleda v'aniroim shenishtan cave. as long as we see that the same pain is present, and it might gets less and less. So we know that the pain is connected to birth. It heals. She has one time, she has a lot of pain. Next time a little bit less pain. We know it healed a little bit. So therefore, during that time, even Zman Rav Achar Leida, as long as the same pain, we're not kriveya. This does not count to be kriveya into the din of Re'eh Machmas Tashmish, even after birth. So and it's similar to Yemei Tayar.
Even if previous times there was no dam and there was the pain?
What do you mean previous times no dam?
You're trying to convey something for that it's mitzad the Leda, not mitzad the Tashmish, right?
Yes.
If previous times she had already had Tashmish and there was no dam.
Right after birth?
And after birth, there was tsar, and then there was the next time there was tsar and no dam. And all of a sudden here, there's a little bit less tsar, and all of a sudden there's dam. Can you still be conveyed to the Leda?
No.
It has to be the first time after.
That's what we're going to see soon, yeah. Okay, that's Siman Kuf Zayin. So over here it seems quite simple. Right after birth, as long as she has pain, and she sees blood, she sees pain, there's pain, and it gets less and less. As long as that first pain is still there and it never fully healed and the bleeding never stopped, she might have to do with he doesn't say if you have to do Shiur Nekim or not, but obviously she probably does have to do Shiur Nekim, but she's not kiveya, she does not become asr, she does not b'dika sheferes, it's all part of the chulshas haleida. Siman Kuf Tes is a little bit different, the story over there. What happens is, over there she saw blood right after birth, and there was pain, and she had a hard birth. Shekashsa b'leidasa. She had a hard birth, and neilat ka'ev, and pain. She was in a lot of pain as a result of the birth. So he says, if it will be just because of pain, it's not enough to be matir her. But when it's a birth plus the pain, then you could be mitzaref. Lahakil.
It's not more only the birth plus the pain that happens the first time.
The birth plus the pain right in the beginning, yeah. Yeah. And he says, this tziruf of pain plus the swat of birth is no less powerful than what the Ramah says of a tziruf of birth plus riyas heter shebintayim. According to the Ramah, she saw because of birth, but there was no pain, like we explained before. And then she had bias heter, and we said the bias heter say that it's no longer makes it us, or we're mitzad of the bias heter afterwards, to say that only the first ones were mitzad Isser, and the next one, and it's the first was mitzad the birth, and afterwards she became tired. Over here we say that the pain is mitzad the birth, and therefore, and you have chulshas haleida, and the pain together with the chulshas haleida say make it that we could be mitzad of it and say that she is mutter. And even no, because pain by itself is a machloikas. The Alter Rebbe is machmer. Pain by itself is a swara. And chulshas haleida by itself is also a swara. The Ramah himself is not making chulshas haleida by itself, like I explained to you in Alter Rebbe. The Ramah is only making chulshas haleida together with something else. Either she saw 3 times, or there was bias heter. So over here we're mitzad of the ka'ev, which by itself is not enough, with the chulshas haleida that by itself is not enough, and together it makes it mutter. And even more so, when you say that Roya Machmas Tashmish, we say it's only midin vestis. And vestis is the Rabbanon. Therefore, if you have that swat of the Rabbanon plus the Ka'ev, we could be Mata. And therefore, he says, Be'Ka'ev Godel, U'Benidin Zeh Shu'achar Aleida, being that's after birth and it's a lot of pain, then we don't make those 3 times as a chazaka, which is Roya Machmas Tashmish. And he says, there's a little bit of a raya from the Masas Binyamin regarding Besula, which we mentioned before. And therefore over here we could rely on the pain that came as a result of the birth, just like we could rely on the pain when it comes to a basula. But he says ultimately it's not the raya from basula is not 100% the raya. Why? Because by basula, if it's only a little bit of tzara and cave, it's not enough. But it's a lot of cave, then you could rely on it. And now he says, but over here we had a situation where she had pain from birth, then the pain stopped, and then when she had the first bia, the pain restarted. So really we could have said we had a big problem, because we mentioned from the Alter Rebbe that when she sees blood as a result of pain, we can't be makel against the Chacham Tzvi. He was machmer, if the pain is only b'shas tashmish, we could say that the pain causes the mocker to release blood, not that the pain itself is a makkah. So over here, being that the pain stopped, she had pain at birth, it's not the same pain continued. Then came bia and she started the pain against us. Now over here, she's had pain during birth, then it stopped. Then she had bia and the pain restarted, but the pain didn't go away. The pain wasn't only during bia. Bia restarted the pain. Now the pain again continued after bia, and it slowed down, and then came the next bia, and she had more pain, and it slowed down again, or went away. But as long as, he explains, what the Alter Rebbe tells you, what the Alter Rebbe is machmer, that says you can't be mekel against the Chacham Tzvi when there's pain, b'shas bia, to say that that's a makkah, we say we don't rely on it because maybe the pain brought about, the pain brought about the bleeding, brought about a period, that only when the pain stops after bia. The pain is only during bia. But over here, no. Over here you have a pain of Leda. And that pain restarted as a result of tashmish. And then the pain might have fizzled out sometime afterwards, but the pain continued. So then we can still consider that pain came as a result of the Leda, and therefore betziruf with the svara that veses adarabanon, we are not going to be so machmer to consider her a roya machmas tashmish. That's the kuf test. Then there's a few points that Tzemach Tzedek brings. For example, the fact that maybe she didn't do a bdika till much later. If she, being that she felt pain, b'shas tashmish, and then if it's only b'shas tashmish, you wouldn't be able to rely on it. But since the cave also continued after tashmish, you could rely on it. And then the Tzemach Tzedek basically says, "Akoponim la'achar shetasik b'refuas v'tirish shepasak hakev yesh lahakol." If she's going to deal with medicine, go to doctors, and the cave is going to slow down, and for sure she's going to be mutter afterwards. But regardless, you're not going to make her asur machmas tashmish because of this cave which came as a result of the birth. The only time you could do that, the only svare when a woman, what we say that the woman becomes asur machmas tashmish for 3 times after one birth, 3 times at sufim, is basically when there is no pain. Or the pain completely stopped, and the pain is only during bia and it stops after bia. Then we could say that is not connected to birth, and therefore she would need a bdika sheferes. Or if she saw 3 times 3, then we could rely on it. But if it's not so, then we could say that it's as it is a result of the birth, and therefore she would not become re'eh machmas tashmish, and she would not become a surah l'bayla. Just like she would not become a surah l'bayla when you have bias heter after bias isur, or when you have 3 times in a row that it becomes a chazakah, or when she sees an yemei toihar. All of these are the same category that you're not able to create to make somebody re'eh machmas tashmish. It has to be clear of any other reason, external reason, which could make it not asur, because it's midin vestus, and vestus are the rabbanon. So therefore, every scenario that we have, which could be a strong svara to be mekel, not stam take one svara, not stam take just Rabbeinu Chananel, or just birth, or just makkah. But when you have a combination of a few points, then you could rely on it, and she does not become re'eh machmas tashmish. That is with this. And next year is going to be, Mitzvah Shem, on Tuesday, we're going to be discussing the effects, certain medical conditions which come as a result of birth, which when the rechem falls down and stuff like that, when the pain is not a result of the birth, but a pain is a result of the bleeding is a result of a medical condition which came from the birth.